Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We are joined today by Jack Curtis, otherwise known for short as Jurdis.
Sure.
What do you do, Jack? What's your career?
Well, right now I am a lab tech for a clinical laboratory. But I just recently took the LSAT because I'd like to become an attorney in the future. So
Is the LSAT essentially your ACT big exam for getting into law school?
yeah, it's the law school admissions test. Yeah, it's basically just like a time test, like a ACT. More compare it to like a GRE as
Okay.
opposed to like an ACT.
So your future career path is law school,
Yeah,
but
that's the goal.
that's not kind of where you've paved yourself so far. You kind of realized the path you were on from undergrad is not your dream job.
Kind of. Like, I knew that I wanted to go into law school, like, probably my junior year of college. That's when I picked up my second major in poli-sci. And then, yeah, I don't know, like, I just kind of worked through that, graduated right into the pandemic, and I was like, fuck, this kind of sucks. Nobody's hiring anymore. So, I was just like hanging around. Like, I wanted to get a job in a law firm because one of the things that I talked about, like, after school or like kind of during my last semester with people was like, yeah, everybody that goes to law school pretty much says they would have taken like the biggest regret of going to law school was people wishing they would have taken like a gap year or two just to like kind of discover what they wanted to do like within law or just kind of like experience the real world a little bit. So I knew I wanted to take a gap year after I graduated, and then like I said, I just couldn't find a job for 6 months, especially at like law firms and stuff. So then I was just like, you know what, screw it. I also majored in biology. I'll just like start applying for lab tech jobs too, because like I knew I could do that. That's pretty easy with my degrees. And then, eventually found this place that I currently work at and have worked at for a year.
So when you're growing up and you're having to choose your major, you knew you were going to undergrad school.
Yep.
At that time, what did you think your future career looked like?
I thought I wanted to do med school, like all throughout high school, really not all throughout high school, I should say. Starting my junior year, I was kind of like, I want to be a doctor, cardiology. Like I was really interested in the heart, really interested me. And then I don't know, like, I don't know what
Hopeless
changed.
romantic.
Yeah, you could classify me as
Big
that, I
heart.
guess. But no, then just like my junior year or sophomore year of college, like second semester, I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to be a doctor. Like,
Why did you think you wanted to be a doctor? When
just
you were
because
going
I was
into
like,
school?
I was good at science. Like, I knew science really well. It came naturally to me.
Sure.
But so does like the reading and the like reading analysis and like the comprehension and the writing and logical,
And going into college, you don't think about it much. You hear doctors make a lot of money.
Well,
I
yeah,
understand science.
that
Why
was
not?
one of my other main motivators was like, I know doctors get paid a ton. Like med school's expensive, but if you can become a successful doctor, paying off those loans isn't anything. So, well,
Okay. So
Yeah.
sophomore year, what goes through your mind where you realize med school is not it, law school is where it's at?
I just started taking like upper level like technical science classes that I was just like, I'm just not interested in this. Like OChem, like I did fine in OChem, but it just like wasn't interesting to me. And that's something that's like kind of like a cornerstone for a lot of like at least STEM majors, I would say. Not really like engineering or mathematics, but like a lot of science based majors have to go through some type of organic chemistry, and then all the upper level science courses too. I was just like, I'm like, I understand this and like I'm decent at it, but it's just not that like interesting to me anymore. And then I started taking some like poli-sci classes, and I was like, oh, this is like, these are really interesting to me, like learning about this stuff, history too. So I was like, oh, maybe that's not the right path.
So that could be a good thing when you're going into college. You're between a couple paths. Typically, set yourself up for the hardest one. And then when you decide to pivot later on, you already have those gen ed courses, your basic biology, chemistry, anything that you might need to pivot to perhaps a less demanding course routine, at least in your undergrad years before it's very specialty course focused?
Yeah. I suppose like it worked out for me really well because poli-sci and bio at Madison, there was a couple different programs you could have done bio through, a couple different schools, but I decided to go with just like letters and science, which poli-sci was also like in the School of Letters and Science. So it was really easy for me to just be like, oh, I've already fulfilled like 80% of the undergrad or the like gen ed requirements, almost all of them, I think, by the time I picked up poli-sci. So it was really easy for me to just like take the specific poli-sci classes I needed and then just graduate with that degree too. But I would say the biggest thing is just to like keep an open mind. Like if you find yourself really attracted to like one specific area of your like undergrad course work, like I would say try and explore that a little bit, because you never know, you might like it way more and be actually interested in it.
And that's the tough part. You go into college, you don't really know if you like it until you take enough courses in it to realize I've wasted a couple of years, or I hit the lottery. This is my good path. Okay. That's very interesting too, because last episode was Sophia, the dentist, or soon to be dentist.
Sure.
She really liked all those biology, chemistry courses. So that's kind of a big indicator. If you are questioning your passion, it's like, oh, when you're studying any types of these classes, are you thinking in your head, this sucks, I'm just going to memorize it, pass the exam, and forget it? Or is it, this is interesting, it's intriguing me? So there's kind of that flip switch between you two finding what job you want.
Yeah, and I mean, if you can recognize that that's just like what you're doing to get through classes, like you're just like, I'm not retaining any of this, I'm not learning it, I'm memorizing it for a 3-hour period and then I forget about it. That's, probably not a great sign that you're doing what you want to do, I would say, I guess.
Makes sense. So you graduate. After graduation, you've already decided law school is your path, but at least at a minimum, one gap year to kind of figure out what specialty you want to take. Do I want to put people in jail? Do I want to keep people from going to jail? Or do I want to do one of the many other opportunities out there? Have you decided between all those which you'd prefer?
Yeah, it was actually really nice. Like I have some family members and I have some decent connections with people that could hook me up with like working attorneys. So I had like a bunch of meetings, not for like job interviews, but just to kind of like pick the brains of these attorneys' minds. Just be like, what was your process after you graduated undergrad? Like, what did you, what did you think of law school? Like, what was your thought process going into law school and stuff like that? And I originally wanted to go into environmental law, and I told a bunch of these attorneys that I talked to, and they were like, that's a really cool area, but it's just so niche that coming out of law school, like it's kind of a combination of luck in finding a job like that in a, finding an opening, and two, like how good were you at that in law school, I guess. And it's kind of a unique specialization. So I kind of asked them, I was like, with my background, like what's a good area that you think is going to be kind of needing a plethora of law students coming out? And they were like, healthcare law is going to need like a ton of attorneys in the like not so far away future. So
you were more prioritizing a more guaranteed chance at a successful job than picking the one that maybe seemed most interesting.
Yeah. And then it helped me that I got this job at a clinical laboratory too, because I've gotten to like kind of work. I don't consider myself a healthcare worker, but like I definitely work in that setting. So like getting to see kind of more like the nitty gritty of, I guess, that type of, work area has been nice. Like it's, something I could think I could get behind because, I have the knowledge of like how clinics kind of work. I've been working at one for years. So like, healthcare law might be different, but, more similar.
Okay. So you graduate undergrad, you can get a job as a lab tech. Do you need a degree to get that job, or what are those requirements?
You technically don't. You can technically get, it's just so specific on like what they need you to do. Like I know some, I think you can go like there are some like 2-year programs or certificates that you can get that would classify you as like a lab tech that you wouldn't need a 4-year degree, but most like will ask you for a 4-year degree and want to see some type of undergraduate work completed in, you know, a STEM courses. So yeah, it's kind of 50-50. I would say if you have like an undergraduate degree, it's obviously going to help you in any job that you want. So
Okay. And then that helps kind of pay the bills during the gap year or however much time you want to take between law school. Do you think in law school you would continue to be a lab tech, or would that be too demanding?
No, I think it would be too demanding. I think
Okay.
I'd have way too much time on my hands, or not on my hands.
Okay, so you take the LSAT, go to law school. How long does law school normally take?
Law school is generally 3 years.
And for a healthcare, or,
Yeah.
is that what it was? Healthcare. lawyer?
Healthcare law. Yeah, I haven't done a ton of research yet on like what schools offer what programs and stuff like that. I'm sure there's, you know, some specializations that might require like an extra year, but I think generally like if you want to just get through most law schools, it's 3 years.
Okay, so do about 3 more years or so, and then is there, you know, an average salary to expect for healthcare law upon law school graduation?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I haven't looked that far into the future.
Yes. But it's good.
Probably.
We know that much.
I would hope.
Because you have
maybe
to go through about minimum 7 years of debt. And
Yeah.
then it has to be slightly a trade-off to pay that back upon graduating law school.
Well, I mean, I didn't have to take out debt through undergrad, which was really nice.
Subtle flex.
I worked my ass off in the summers for it. But yeah, no, I didn't. So it'll only be 3 years of debt for me, but it's still like a significant amount of debt to undertake. You know, any type of schooling after undergrad is ridiculously expensive. So,
And then once you hit that career, what are the work-life balance? Is it, I mean, right now as a lab tech versus going to become an employee in healthcare law, is your work-life balance going to change drastically? What is that difference?
I would assume it will. Basically, what I've like heard, whether it's through people I know or just like general research, is that like depending on the area of law you go into, it's like just a 9-year grind, basically, where you are just trying to like outcompete everybody else in your class that graduated into the workforce to get to like partner status at some of these firms and stuff like that, or eventually like start your own firm. So I would expect to be working like significantly more once I graduate law school, just because especially with how demanding of an area I think it's going to become in the future. Yeah, I would imagine I'm going to be working much more.
High salary, but high expectations, a lot of time at work.
Yeah.
And then is that actual day in the life? Is it like the movies? You know, I just saw Lincoln Lawyer with Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
Very intense. It makes it seem like working in law is phenomenal. You know, you do super cool stuff. You're like a detective and you're on all these cool missions all the time. Or am I just sitting at a desk doing paperwork 90% of the time? And then there's those very cool occasional scenes where, you know, you do something magnificent and accomplishing.
I would say the latter more than 90% of the time. You're just doing paperwork. You're just doing like boring research. But, you know, I haven't seen The Lincoln Lawyer, so I don't have a frame of reference, but I'm assuming he's like a trial lawyer.
Yeah.
And
Picture any law movie where there's an attorney and it becomes super intense action, and it's like, it almost gets you a switch up near the end of the movie where I thought this person was innocent or guilty, but that's only because of the perspective that was provided to me. So, you know, we want to believe the information that's given to us, but is that what's really there? And it's one of those kind of mystery, deep, see down, hit that curveball and be like, whoa.
Okay. Yeah, no, I would
That's
imagine.
not real.
Well, I mean,
for the most part.
In the life of like a prosecutor, like a defense attorney, maybe, you know, that's much more involved. You're actively working through like criminal cases and stuff like that. But any type of law, I shouldn't say any type, a lot of types of law involve like you just like working behind a desk and like doing research, like analyzing the laws that exist, and like either, you know, depending on what you're doing, trying to find loopholes in those laws or trying to, you know, enforce those laws or make them more airtight, essentially. But yeah, I don't know. I would imagine that most professional attorneys do not experience what Matthew McConaughey experienced in that movie.
Yes. He just gets to reap all the benefits without the work.
True.
Okay, so then what would you say the main perks of going into law are? You know, you have all these career paths in the entire world. Why law school?
Again, I think it's what I'm personally good at. I think I could be a good attorney, but in terms of like general perks, obviously salary generally is going to be pretty good. If you go into being like a public defender after law school, you're definitely underpaid, but you know, salary is generally pretty good. Depending on the type of law you do, again, it can be a very fulfilling job. You know, if you're getting people, if you're, you know, defending innocent people and getting them, you know, keeping them out of jail or prison, you know, that's a pretty nice feeling. If you're a prosecutor trying to, you know, convict people who have done crime, you know, I'm sure it's fulfilling to be successful at that too. So it can be a very fulfilling job. And then, I don't know, like I'm assuming if you get to like the upper echelons of being attorney, it can be very lucrative outside of your own job too, you know, with
And then
status.
On the flip side, would you be able to argue that it's very stressful because, you know, you're keeping innocent people out of jail, but you're also keeping criminals out of jail if you're doing your job correctly, or you are putting criminals into jail, but you're also putting innocent people in jail, you know? It's more of a focus. When you actually get there, you know, as you said, everyone's almost on this 9-year sprint trying to outdo their classmates, have the best performance, have the best record of winning their court cases. It's almost like it's slightly a game from my perspective, that it's not as much always having to do the right thing, but do the thing that you're being paid to do, even if it's the wrong outcome.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like I said, most trial law, like most, I don't want to say most, again, like I'm not that well versed in like what, you know, the numbers would actually look like, but I would assume most lawyers probably never actually like go to court. You know, like trial law is like one area of law in particular that you can kind of like go into, and it's much more evolved around like the actual laws that we, you know, are enforcing day to day. But like if you become like a tax attorney, like you probably won't have to go like to court, or a healthcare law or environmental law. I mean, it's all, again, dependent on what you do. If you worked for the EPA as an environmental lawyer, you'd probably have to go into court if you're going to take these like oil companies, you know, to court for violating, you know, some protective act or something like that. But most, I would say, don't actually go. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, that's kind of, it could happen. That's kind of, it's unfortunate when it does. I'm not going to say it isn't, because it obviously is, but you know, that's your job. Sometimes you have to defend people you don't want to defend. Sometimes you have to prosecute people you don't want to prosecute, you know.
And then you legally are on the line, even if you know, for example, your client's guilty, but you're defending them. You're legally on the line. You can't throw them under the bus. You know, there's some sort of agreement that confidentiality, what is that called?
I think it's attorney-client confidentiality.
Yeah, so
privilege, attorney-client privilege. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, then you're almost putting yourself legally at risk if you try to do the right thing, if you're presented with the facts that kind of prove the opposite of what you're defending.
Yeah, I don't know how that works. Like I said, that's not the area of expertise I want to go into. But
that's just what we all see. When we imagine law school, when someone says law school, everyone just pictures, you know, in the courtroom, the attorneys.
Right. Sure.
There's not the image of all these other specialties, such as healthcare and all these other legal roles that you could
just
take
corporate
on.
law in general, I feel like isn't super well represented in.
Okay, so there's a vast more opportunity of specialties. You know, law school doesn't tie you down to one thing.
Sure.
So it's got these perks, you know, salary. You can feel very fulfilled you know, do some great things, accomplish, make the world a better place. Now, what are the biggest downsides? You know, if I'm about to commit to law school, what is something that maybe someone younger than you or less experienced could know that would better prepare them? Like, maybe this isn't their path for me, or I didn't realize I have to do all this.
Well, it's a lot of work. It's a ton of work. Especially like going through law school, especially. You know, I obviously haven't done it yet, but I know a bunch of people that have been, or I know a couple of people that are currently in it, and they say it's a type of schooling that like you've never really prepared for ever in your life. Like, it's just so much reading. They're just like, you just have to read. That's kind of just like how you start to interpret law and like analyze laws. You just have to read it. You have to read equivalent court cases that deal with those specific laws and stuff like that. So I guess I would just be prepared for like a very different type of work if you want to start going into law school. It's a much different way of thinking. It's like very logical thinking. You know, you can't assume things that don't matter. Like, you can't assume facts. You can't assume that just because one thing happened, another thing is gonna happen, even if it seems likely.
You need proof. You need evidence.
It's a very
guilty until proven
straightforward
innocent.
way of thinking. Like, you just have to, I don't know. It's just a different way of thinking, I think.
Okay. So make a good salary, get fulfilled, but got to commit a long time to schooling, you know, pay tuition, spend a lot of time studying. It's not easy. A lot of time reading.
Right. Yeah.
A lot more kind of problem solving and actually critically thinking rather than just simple reading. So
Yeah.
it's going to be very mentally involved. It's not at all easy. So go through that. It's also not as much like the movies where it's just action packed. They show you the best parts, but you got to prepare for most days behind a desk dealing with paperwork, reading and writing if need be. Okay. But hopefully if that's fulfilling, you find that passion early on and can pursue it. Okay. Now that you've been through all those details, now say you're 18 again, you can have the same knowledge you have right now. What path would you take? What would you do differently?
Well, there's two things I always think about. The first thing would be to not major in biology and just major in poli-sci and maybe do something like English, where I wouldn't have to stay as long in school and could maybe get started on some stuff earlier. Is the first thing I always think about that I would do differently. If I was going to do completely all over again, couldn't pick the same major, like had to do something completely new, I would go into computer science.
Okay. And we can get more into computer science in a later podcast as a potential career opportunity.
Yeah.
But you would probably try to graduate a bit earlier if you could. And then would you recommend a gap year?
Yeah, it's, again, I think just like a super personal decision. For me, obviously it helped. My decision was helped by the fact that there's still a pandemic going on, and my whole thought process is if I'm going to go to law school and pay the amount of money that law school costs, I'm going to go to school in person and be in class learning. I'm not going to sit on a computer and try and do everything virtually. I hate learning that way. It doesn't work for me. I need to be like there. So whenever I can be guaranteed that we're not going to have to go back to this online stuff, then,
that's the timing for you.
Yeah, that would be the timing for me. But yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, there's no pandemic when I graduate, and then I could just maybe start, looking for jobs right away or go straight into law school. It's up to the individual, I think.
Okay. And then final question for you, Jerdis.
Yes.
You've answered a lot of questions, but say I'm a listener still on the edge, find it interesting. There's all these specialties. I don't know if I want to do healthcare or what type of law, or if I want to pursue something more closer to being a lab tech. Is there a way I can reach you? Social media, LinkedIn?
Yeah,
email?
I guess. If you want to, I have a LinkedIn. Just, search my name, Jack Curtis. I don't pay attention to it much. But if you shoot me a message, I'll probably respond. If you I don't know, Facebook. If you want to DM me on Instagram, it's Jack_Curtis11. I guess I'll respond to you there. Same thing on Twitter, I think. So
He's all over. And
Yeah.
Curtis is Curtis.
yes, correct.
I'll make sure you're found.